If you come home from a long day of labor and find that the woman who used to greet you with genuine curiosity now meets your presence with a cold, flat indifference, you are not witnessing a temporary phase of exhaustion. You are looking at the exact moment her emotional capital is being deposited into a completely different account. The most painful illusion a man can wrap around his mind is the belief that a woman can simply run out of energy for a relationship. In the deep engineering of human psychology, energy doesn't just vanish into thin air. It is redirected. When an active alignment begins to form with an external party, her behavioral investments undergo a systematic migration. She stops pouring her enthusiasm, her laughter, and her deep attention into your foundation because those high-value assets are required to secure her position on a new horizon. You are left holding the heavy financial liabilities of the household, providing the protection and the stability, while the authentic warmth of her spirit has already moved to a different location. Today, we are going to walk through a brutal, hard-hitting psychological assessment of the first 5 major signs that a woman has shifted her investment away from your life. We are going to strip away the comfortable excuses before you spend another year of your limited life force maintaining a structure for a partner who has already emotionally checked out of the building. The first definitive indicator of this capital redirection is the verbal energy bankruptcy. When a woman is fully anchored in your world, communication is an organic river. She shares the small details of her day, she asks your perspective on her challenges, and she leans into long, unhurried conversations in the quiet hours of the evening. But when her focus shifts to an external target, a sudden silence falls over your living room. You will notice that her answers to your questions become brief, functional, and completely hollow. If you ask how her afternoon went, she will offer a single-word response like, "Fine," without adding any color or asking about your day. Her voice loses its melody when she speaks to you, sounding like a tired employee talking to a manager. This is not an ordinary sign of stress. It is a defensive boundary designed to protect her inner world from your sight. Her brain understands that sharing details creates intimacy, and since she is actively building an intimacy somewhere else, she starves your environment of her conversational assets to keep those channels completely reserved for her new investment. This connects seamlessly to the identity and style metamorphosis. In the normal course of a stable union, a person's personal style and presentation establish a predictable, comfortable baseline. They dress for the reality of the life you share. However, when a partner begins to invest her romantic capital elsewhere, a sudden, unprompted transformation occurs in how she carries herself into the world. You will notice that she begins buying an entirely new wardrobe, changing her fragrance, or dedicating hours to her appearance before leaving the house for what she claims are completely mundane, routine errands. If she is just going to a local supermarket or a casual work meeting, she prepares with the intensity of someone attending a first date. Conversely, the moment she returns to your shared space, she instantly sheds that elevated identity, reverting to a careless, uninspired presentation. This behavioral divergence is a loud psychological announcement. Human beings only dress up for the target they are actively trying to conquer. If her finest aesthetic investments are exclusively displayed in the outside world while you are only given the unbrushed, uninspired leftovers, she is signaling that her market value is being pitched to an entirely different audience. Look closely at the slow, heartbreaking psychological disintegration of Julian. Julian was a dedicated operations director for a regional logistics firm. A man whose entire life was built on recognizing patterns, tracking resource allocations, and ensuring that every system ran at peak efficiency. He was a natural provider, believing that his primary duty was to shield his partner, Vanessa, from the harsh financial friction of the modern world. Julian believed that a secure, mature man never questioned a woman's shifting moods, interpreting her growing distance as the natural byproduct of her demanding career as a corporate designer. Julian became our tragic example because he fell completely into the trap of rationalized denial. He and Vanessa shared a beautiful suburban home that Julian completely financed. He handled the bills, covered her car payments, and provided a safe, frictionless sanctuary so she could build her independent design portfolio. But over a course of 10 months, Julian began to realize he was living with a phantom. The woman who used to meet him at the front door with an embrace now stayed seated on the couch, barely looking up when he entered the room. The true erosion manifested in how she allocated her social intelligence. One Saturday evening, Julian arranged a quiet dinner at a restaurant they had both loved for years. Throughout the entire meal, Vanessa sat in complete silence, her eyes drifting across the room, her answers to his conversation reduced to empty nods. When Julian gently reached across the table and asked, "Vanessa, you seem completely detached tonight. Is there something on your mind that we need to fix?" She instantly turned the conversation into an interrogation of his security. She looked at him with a cold, dismissive sigh and said, "Julian, I work 60 hours a week. I am absolutely drained. The fact that you are demanding me to entertain you at dinner just shows how needy you are. Can't I just have some peace without you analyzing me?" Julian, deeply terrified of looking like an overbearing, controlling partner, immediately backed down. He swallowed his intuition, apologized for disrupting her peace, and spent the next 3 months trying to be even more accommodating. He took over the household chores, cooked the meals, and gave her absolute space, believing that if he just lowered his demands to zero, her warmth would naturally return. He became a butler in a house he paid for, watching her leave early every morning with a radiant energy, beautifully dressed for her new clients, while returning home to give him nothing but a cold, silent back at night. The illusion shattered completely when Julian attended a local business expo to support his logistics firm. As he walked through the main hall, he caught sight of Vanessa standing near an exhibition booth. She wasn't tired. She wasn't drained. She was laughing with a bright, magnetic intensity, leaning into the conversation of a male marketing consultant, her body language completely open, displaying a level of flirtatious enthusiasm that Julian hadn't seen in his home for over a year. When she noticed Julian standing there, her face instantly dropped into the exact same cold, annoyed expression she used at their dinner table. Julian realized in that devastating flash that she hadn't run out of life. She had simply been hoarding her life force to spend it on a new target. He was left with an empty marriage, a broken spirit, and the realization that he had spent a year funding the shelter for a woman who was actively building a bridge to another man's world. He proved that a man who accepts silence as a sign of exhaustion will eventually realize he was just financing the holding tank for her next connection. The fourth definitive sign of this migration is the selective insulation tactic. When a woman is investing in a different horizon, she will begin to deliberately isolate you from her social circles and professional milestones. You will notice that she stops mentioning your name to her friends, and when she discusses her future goals, the word "we" is completely replaced by the word "I." If her colleagues organize a social gathering where partners are naturally welcome, she will quickly manufacture an excuse as to why it's better for you to stay home. She might tell you that the event will be incredibly boring for you, or that she needs to focus entirely on shop talk. This is a deliberate act of space creation. By keeping your presence entirely insulated from her external world, she ensures that she doesn't complicate her single identity within that new network. She is creating a clean, unencumbered space where she can cultivate her new investment without the awkward reality of your existence disrupting the narrative. This leads directly into the fifth pattern, which we call the microaggression friction. When a human being is committing an emotional infraction against a dedicated partner, their subconscious mind experiences a massive amount of internal guilt. To relieve this psychological pressure, their brain must find a way to make you the villain. You will find that she suddenly becomes hypercritical of your smallest habits. The way you speak, the clothes you choose, your financial pacing, or even the way you breathe becomes an object of sudden, volatile irritation. She will pick fights over absolutely nothing, turning a simple misunderstanding into a massive debate about the viability of the entire relationship. This constant friction serves a dual purpose. First, it creates a psychological distance that justifies her withdrawal from your bed and your presence. Second, it allows her to tell herself that the relationship is failing because you are difficult to live with, thereby freeing her conscience to invest her remaining loyalty into the new option she is waiting in the wings. The reality is that a man's primary responsibility is to read the physical ledger of behavior, not the comforting script of old promises. If the woman in your house treats your presence like an annoying obligation while saving her finest smiles, her deepest interest, and her aesthetic updates for the outside world, you are no longer in a unified partnership. You are acting as a temporary financial and emotional stabilization fund for a person who is actively shopping for your replacement. A sovereign man does not spend his limited days begging for crumbs of attention, nor does he try to perform harder to win back a heart that has already been outsourced. He recognizes that a loyalty that must be negotiated or begged for is an asset that has already lost its economic and emotional validity. Stop letting a fear of loneliness blind you to the clear geometry of her actions. Reclaim your awareness, stand firmly on your baseline, and understand that your life force is far too valuable to be wasted on a partner who has already moved her gold to a different vault. In this final movement, we are stepping directly out of the emotional wreckage of the verbal energy bankruptcy and establishing the unyielding parameters of the sovereign perimeter. We have exposed the subtle, real-world mechanics of the identity metamorphosis and the microaggression friction. Now, we are going to construct the psychological firebreak that ensures your masculine self-respect is never traded for an uncalibrated compromise. We are entering the domain of the baseline audit, the precise moment where a man stops analyzing her excuses and starts measuring the physical flow of her investments. We will break down why your absolute willingness to exit a dying alignment is the only response that honors your history and your future. By the end of this breakdown, you will understand that confronting a systematic drainage of warmth isn't an act of jealousy. It is the ultimate shield of a self-respecting man. You aren't losing an authentic companion. You are liquidating a high-risk liability and securing the absolute clarity of your own kingdom. If you're catching the deeper pattern here, you're already ahead of most people. This channel is for those who think before they react and question before they conclude. If that's you, subscribe and stay in the loop. Leave your perspective in the comments. That's where the real insight builds. The sixth profound marker of a shifting alignment is the mirror deflection. When a partner has moved her psychological capital to a new target, her internal sense of integrity experiences massive, ongoing friction. To survive her own reflection, she must find a way to project her betrayal onto your behavior. You will notice that she suddenly begins accusing you of the exact patterns she is cultivating in the dark. She will look at you out of nowhere and say, "I feel like you're not fully present with me anymore. Are you talking to someone else? Are you planning an escape?" This is a highly sophisticated behavioral smokescreen. By placing you on the defensive, her brain forces you to spend your cognitive energy proving your innocence, explaining your movements, and reassuring her of your total devotion. While you are busy defending your character, the focus is entirely removed from her actions, leaving her free to continue investing her vital resources into the external target without your interference. This connects directly to the seventh sign, which we call the present absence. This is a unique state of behavioral existence where a person is physically inside your room, but entirely absent from your reality. She sits on your couch, eats the food you provided, and walks across your floors, but her eyes are completely glazed over, fixed on a horizon you cannot see. If you try to engage her in a light, playful manner, her reaction is slow, heavy, and heavily forced. She mimics the movements of a partner, but the electric current of attraction has been completely turned off. Her mind is actively living in a different geography, rehearsing conversations with the new person or reliving moments from her outside interactions. The sovereign man does not try to shake her out of this trance. He understands that a body without a spirit is just a structural ghost. If her physical form is the only asset she is leaving in your home while her imagination lives on a different block, her investment has already crossed the border. Look at the absolute, unyielding calibration of Dominic. Dominic was a senior quality assurance inspector who spent his life analyzing structural integrity and enforcing zero-tolerance safety standards on industrial projects. He knew that a structure with a hidden fracture below the foundation was an active hazard that could not be allowed to stand. When he met Valeria, an executive assistant at a high-end luxury firm, he established a clear, transparent baseline of what a committed partnership looked like to him from their very first date. Dominic is the winner in our story because he practiced the law of instant separation. 6 months into their relationship, Dominic began to observe a pattern of calculated omission. While Valeria was completely comfortable using his premium vehicle, staying at his coastal property, and enjoying the lifestyle his career provided. Her public energy underwent a sudden, cold shift. During a major company gala where she was being recognized, she explicitly chose to go with a group of unattached co-workers instead of bringing Dominic, framing it as a necessary corporate networking event where having a partner would complicate her professional image. Dominic didn't throw a tantrum, and he didn't check her social circles in the middle of the night. He sat down with her the morning after the gala, opened a cup of coffee, and spoke with a voice that contained absolute, chilling clarity. He said, "Valerie, I've analyzed the architecture of our connection over the last 6 months. You want the private benefits of my protection, my resources, and my loyalty, but you are actively maintaining an external persona that leaves your market value completely open for approach. That is your authentic standard, and you have every right to live it. But my standard is a unified alignment. I do not finance a waiting room for a woman who is still testing the wind. I am officially removing my investment from this arrangement today." Valerie instantly deployed the predictable script. She wept, told him he was being incredibly harsh, and accused him of throwing away a beautiful romance over a single corporate party. She promised to introduce him to everyone next time to prove her love. Dominic didn't flinch. He looked her in the eye and said, "An enforcement of transparency that only happens under the threat of my departure is not a reflection of your character. It is just damage control. I am not interested in a loyalty that has to be extracted through an ultimatum." Dominic won because he had the courage to let the illusions burn. He packed his belongings, executed a clean financial separation, and redirected his total focus toward expanding his engineering firm and scaling his physical health. Within a year, his company had secured 2 major state contracts. His investment portfolio had expanded by 40%, and he had established a daily baseline of mental peace that no ambivalent partner could ever disrupt. Valeria realized too late that Dominic wasn't a boy she could keep on a string with sporadic affection. He was a sovereign entity who would gladly walk into the desert alone before he would sit at a table where his position was a secret. He proved that a man's ultimate protection is his absolute willingness to completely close the door on a partner who keeps her eyes on the exit. The 8th definitive indicator is the resource hoarding protocol. When a woman is transitioning out of an alliance, her long-term economic behavior inside the house will suddenly change. She stops contributing to shared financial goals, becomes highly protective of her personal income, and minimizes her investment in the upkeep of your shared environment. She behaves like a tenant preparing to break a lease, keeping her capital liquid and close to her chest. This material withdrawal mirrors her emotional extraction. Her brain is preparing the logistics for her next chapter, ensuring she has the maximum amount of leverage available when the time comes to execute her departure. This brings us to the 9th sign, the rejection of protective custody. A woman who respects her man takes comfort in his protective canopy. She values his guidance, his presence in her major life decisions, and his leadership. But when she begins investing in someone else, your protection becomes an annoying barrier to her plans. If you offer to pick her up from an evening event, she will aggressively refuse, insisting on taking a rideshare alone or getting a ride from a colleague. She rejects your care because your presence creates a physical obstruction to the external connection she is trying to cultivate. The 10th and final sign is the total erasure of gratitude. The organic phrases of appreciation, the quiet thank yous for your support, the small tokens of affection, are completely wiped from the relationship ledger. Your labor is treated as a basic baseline requirement, an entitlement that she is owed for simply existing in your space. This happens because, in her mind, her standards have already escalated to match the value of her new investment, leaving you looking outdated and insufficient in her eyes. The reality is that you cannot build an unshakable empire with a companion who treats your presence like a temporary lease. If your warmth has been outsourced, stop trying to blow on the cold coals of her memory. Step away from the structure, reclaim your life force, and build a future where loyalty is an absolute baseline, not a negotiation. I have a smart, reflective question for the men who are watching their partner's energy drain out of the house while trying to convince themselves it's just a phase. If you were an architect inspecting a skyscraper, and you noticed that the core concrete columns were cracking, The vital electrical grids were being systematically disconnected, and the primary tenant was moving their gold to a building across the street. Would you spend your time painting the walls and begging them to stay, or would you pull your team out of the structure before the roof collapsed on your life? Drop a comment below and share your sovereign insight. What was the exact moment you realized that her exhaustion was actually just a redirection of her life force to another man? How did your empire transform the second you walked away from the ghost? Let the Brotherhood know how you spotted the capital migration before you lost your path. Your clarity is the navigation guide for the next man currently sitting in a cold house. Let's build the Council of Sovereign Men together. If you're still here, you weren't just watching. You were paying attention. That means you're done with noise and ready for clarity. If that's you, subscribe and stay connected to this space. Drop a comment with what stood out. I read them. Stay grounded. Stay aware. I'll see you in the next one.